Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L. Now let's talk One Piece chapter 923, Emperor Kaito versus Luffy. Don't know what happened there. Anyway, just getting into the chapter 923. You see it in the title of the video. This is exactly what I think. I think this is going to be very good for Luffy. Luffy really needed this. Like, he really deserved this loss. I think this is good. I think this is a good opportunity for Oda to establish some things. I think this is a good thing to happen to Luffy, even though it does kind of suck. There are still quite a few avenues for Luffy to get away from this situation. If not, there's still avenues for Luffy to survive any kind of situation going on from this. Like, after all, it's One Piece. It's Luffy's story. He's gonna probably be fine. It's just a matter of how much is the surrounding body count gonna be. And this chapter is kinda leaning into that a little bit with what happened to Tama. But regardless, before we get there, let's just talk starting from the back and then moving towards the front of the chapter. We end off the chapter with Luffy getting wiped by Kaito. This is great stuff, right? Because one thing that I was thinking last week when this whole thing went down, before Luffy delivered the big punch to Kaito's head, was just that Luffy's biting off way more than he can chew. This is a significant problem. Luffy's gone into this situation with guns a-blazing, and it might have worked with Big Mom because Big Mom was set up in such a way that things could be done, and then Luffy's final fight for that whole arc was going to be Katakuri. You know, things might have worked out that way, but this situation, it did seem like it was going to be a rude awakening for Luffy. And it did start with a rude awakening last week when his friends got attacked, but everything after that was just not a good idea. In this chapter, we ultimately end up seeing one of the critical flaws with Luffy's character at the moment. When the time skip initially started, people were all like, hey, Luffy shouldn't be goofing around like this. He shouldn't be doing the Gum Gum UFO. He shouldn't have Zoro telling him to keep his shit under control, to take things seriously. You know, that was one of the big complaints going in the fandom when it came to Luffy's attitude post time skip. Especially when you consider this was a guy that lost someone who was very close to him, and you would have thought that he would have grown a little bit, or at least that was the general idea with some people in the fandom. But on the flip side, I thought it was okay because, you know, Luffy at the end of the day is this guy that wants freedom. So it just meant to me that Luffy was more going to be a character that was just going to try and keep being him. And so the power that Luffy acquired was power that was specifically there to allow Luffy to continue being Luffy. So in terms of that kind of direction, you know, I think Oda's totally okay to go in that direction with Luffy. However, there are significant problems with that mentality, and we're seeing them occur in this chapter, and in the previous one as well. And that is, specifically, Luffy continues to go on with the optimistic outlook, or the childlike wonder, or, you know, just the general lack of caution. He continues to go on with this mentality, and that is fair. However, when he reaches a point where that mentality isn't jiving well anymore, when it reaches a point where there is significant opposition to that mentality, what you will see Luffy doing is thinking that he can handle that situation. And sometimes his reckless abandon will work. Sometimes it will go really well. We've had great moments that came out thanks to that, like when Luffy versus Doflamingo, and even Luffy's clash with Fujitora. Those were like some really great moments that came out of that. But this situation was finally one where the enemy was just too much for Luffy to handle. So in this situation when you had obstacles to Luffy's way of life cropping up, Luffy got angry like he always does and tries to go deal with it. But then this time it doesn't work out, and the obstacle keeps reappearing, and he keeps making more and more mistakes. When you look at the events of this chapter, Luffy is specifically angry at one, letting Tama go by herself. So right, that's one of his first mistakes. He can't apply like the happy-go-lucky life like idea to what happened with Tama. And also he's still complaining about he doesn't know what's going on with his friends. So instead he's gonna go and try and beat down the enemy. And it doesn't work. It's a full rebuttal. But the thing is, there were two ways to go about this situation. One was the way that Luffy went, and the second was the way that involved being a little bit more careful, taking proper stock of the enemy that was before them. For instance, when Luffy and Law were running down the mountain, instead of Luffy attacking the dragon, he probably could have gone back to see his friends. Right? That could have happened. There could have been a moment where he goes back, because then when you hear him complaining about it, hey, we don't know if our friends are still alive. It's like, well, Luffy, you could have turned back instead of jumping right into the lion's den, given what you had seen. Of course, Luffy didn't know how strong that was, but then again, that doesn't stop Law from understanding how strong Kaito is. And especially when it comes back to Luffy, who has a pretty good idea of what his limitations are, because his limitations ended up being a very big factor in the Katakuri fight. So Luffy realistically could have thought about that if he put in the effort. However, that's not a big deal. He goes in to attack Kaito, and it's fine to say, well, Luffy did that because he needed to minimize destruction. Although, if you consider it, Kaito blew up a building. Chances are maybe he wasn't going to continue there. Anyway, Luffy goes into that situation. He's complaining about it later on in the chapter, and in between those 2 points we have him again telling himself he should have gone with Tama. Well, what does that line really mean to Luffy? Well, it means that he thought everything was safe. He made a mistake, and what happens when Luffy makes a mistake about the situation that he is involved in? He gets angry, and once he gets angry, what happens? Well, the villain gets their butt beat up, right? Unfortunately, this time, Luffy was faced with Kaito, who was taking all his hits. So not really someone that is gonna listen to Luffy's way of doing things. So overall, I'm very happy to see that this happened. It's important that Luffy learns that he's not strong enough to be able to enforce his way of life. And Kaito's ultimate line to Luffy's asking him what kind of king does Luffy think he's gonna be or whatever, you know, just questioning that whole claim about being Pirate King, I thought was appropriate. Luffy is continuously getting angry about his weakness in these situations, and well, that all the things that happen here and the things that are making him angry are ultimately born from his own negligence and his own miscalculation of the situation. And I think this is really good, because Luffy needs to have these little moments happen again, because Luffy's gonna stand up and he's gonna get better and he's gonna develop from these, and hopefully we'll see Luffy, at least when Zoro tells him to be careful, hopefully we'll see Luffy be a tiny bit more careful. On the Kaito side of things, Kaito was pretty cool in this chapter. His dragon taking the hits from Luffy and his human form taking the hits from Luffy were all pretty interesting to watch. Truthfully, his human form has the more interesting interaction with Luffy's hits, because when you look at that panel, you look at Kaito and it's pretty much, Kaito's not blocking, he just decides to take the hits. And you can see that his body is taking those hits. They're not just impervious, they're not just being reflected, he's taking them. But the big thing that is pretty awesome to see and is living up to Kaito's whole deal is that he ultimately just gets up and sighs. He sighs at Luffy for not even being able to inflict serious damage on him, or maybe not making him feel anything more than what he's used to. It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell because he's drawn in such a way that it looks like the attacks are reaching him, but it ultimately feels like it just doesn't faze him. So it's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting dynamic. Like, one thing that you got from the fight scenes in this chapter were that Kaito, he looks really just, it feels nice when Luffy hits him, because the damage looks like, oh yeah, like, yeah, Kaito's getting tossed around here. But ultimately, it's just, this guy was looking right at Luffy. He never made even an indication to run away. And then he's just ultimately not satisfied. What does this guy need to do to get a real thrill is the big question. He took all the hits, and there he is, just with one hit, he wipes Luffy off the face of the map, and that's pretty awesome. That's pretty cool. I'm hoping that this guy is just so unamused by Luffy that he just kind of like walks off, because he's like, yeah, that guy's not even worth the attention. It'd be even more funny if he says something like I don't know, Kid was better than Luffy. Just something to really rub the salt into the wounds. I think that would be hilarious. Now, optimistically, I think the best thing we could get out of this is that if we later get a situation where Kaito's saying like, oh, that one punch that he gave me to my face was pretty alright, but everything else sucks. You know, so there's some kind of accolade to Luffy. I could see that happening, but we could honestly do without it. Another thing that I'm ultimately wondering here is how much stronger does Luffy need to get? What's going to be the big solution here? Are we going to be seeing Luffy having to team up with someone else? Or are we going to be seeing some other kind of trick pop up? Or is this going to be just a flat out Luffy gets stronger, then he goes deal with this kind of situation? Very excited to see that. And on another note, the Tama and Speed moment was definitely one of the more heartbreaking moments of the chapter. I thought that was really interesting to see there. I thought it was a really brutal image that Oda gave us. Seeing Speed beaten up and the idea that Tama is hurt and also the apple was destroyed. Pretty good imagery. But I do want to say, while Speed is still calling Tama her master, that indicates to me that the devil fruit is still kind of in effect. And that indicates to me that Tama might be okay. Right, because you know how devil fruit effects work. It's pretty much if they get knocked out, the devil fruit effect's gone. This might be a situation where as long as Tama's conscious, and she might be bleeding out, but she might be conscious, things are still okay. So I'm not too concerned about Tama right now. It's going to depend on Oda whether or not he wants to break that convention and then say that the girl has passed away. But I highly doubt that that's going to happen. Overall, I really like this chapter. I think this is good for Luffy, like I said. Luffy got mad that his friends got blown up, and instead of checking on them, he instead decided to hit the dragon. And when that failed, he decided to hit the dragon more after he found out the little girl also got hurt. And then he decided, well, you know, if we take out the dragon, we don't have to worry about having to fight him anymore, so let's do it right now. And it's like, great, Luffy, because of your horrible situational awareness, you've lost. And that's good, because you have to realize you can't solve everything with your current level of strength. The unfortunate thing is, though, because it's Luffy, I don't see him changing. I just see him deciding, okay, I need to get stronger, and then he's gonna be the same careless Luffy. It's what's gonna happen. I think that's how Oda wants to play the game. But it's not really a big deal. It's important that he realizes these are significant problems for him. But when you consider it, like, this has been Luffy's MO since the beginning. Like, Gear 2nd, Gear 3rd came about because he was too weak at a particular point. Then he just kept developing every time he got too weak. And the idea is he wants to protect the people around him, so as long as he keeps having moments where he realizes he can't protect people, he's gonna keep trying to get stronger. So this is pretty much the foundation for whatever new modes Luffy's gonna unveil in the future, and that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that Kaito was a big part of that. Overall, I think Kaito's lived up to the hype, and in some ways, I feel bad for Kaito just because it looks like he really wasted his time with Luffy, and that it sucks to waste your time, right? Luffy should have done better. But anyway, guys, that was my thoughts for this chapter. Overall, like I said, I think this was a good chapter. I think this was a great chapter even. So let me know what you thought down below. Until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.